When the revolution comes.
When the revolution comes.
When the revolution comes. When the revolution comes, some of us will probably catch it on TV with chicken hanging from our mouths. You'll know it's revolution because there won't be no commercial.
We're here with the legendary Abiodun, founding member of the progenitors of hip-hop, the Last Poets. And I would like for you to speak about how the Last Poets got started. And first of all, congratulations. I know your 55th anniversary just passed.
Thank you.
You know. And
yeah. Well, the Last Poets, based upon the 55 years, of course, we got started on May 19th, 1968, here in Harlem, New York. Actually, we're in the park that was then named Mount Morris Park, and it's been renamed to be Marcus Garvey Park now. But the idea of the group came a year before that, 1967, when I was working with a young man named David Nelson. He ran an anti-poverty program in El Barrio, Spanish Harlem. And the name of the anti-poverty program was Double Block Recreational Educational Program. It was between 118th Street and 119th Street, between 3rd and Lexington Avenue. And I was working, I just finished high school, and I'd done 1 year in college, and I was actually working as assistant director of the recreation department, which meant that if the kids wanted to play volleyball, I get the volleyball and play with them. Basketball, same thing. But it was a great experience, and I got a chance to meet David, and I was beginning to write a little poetry, and he had been writing poetry for a while, in English and Spanish, by the way. And he had mentioned to me one evening that he wanted to do a collective of men, like around, and I don't know if he gave him a number, but he said he wanted to have a collective of men from different walks of life going on stage as a unit, and being poets, but being unified like a group. And he would, because his concern was that we were trying to have a movement, we were trying to liberate ourselves at that time, and our fractionalism was causing problems. We were not unified. So David felt that we had some poets who mostly don't hang out in groups. They usually hang out on their own. They're solo. They ride solo most of the time. But he felt that we had a group of young men coming from different walks of life on stage as a group. It would be a great example for black folks to recognize the need for unity. Now we had to try to shelve our differences and come together to get this, because we got the same foot on all of our necks. So on April 4th of 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King was killed. And I was totally wiped out by his death, because even though I never could have marched with Dr. King, I was told by my father as a child, if somebody puts their hands on you, break their hand, and when they look at it in a cast, they'll know why they shouldn't touch you. Dr. King had a nonviolent philosophy, and even though they were being hosed down with the fire hoses and dogs were attacking them and the police were beating them with billy clubs, he had a clear rule that if you were going to march with him, you couldn't fight back. So I knew I could have never marched with him, because I'd have been kicked out immediately, because the first person to try to hurt me, I'm going to try to hurt them back. But I respected him. My mother revered him. And so I just felt that killing him was a direct smack in all of black people's faces. I felt it was just it was a gross offense against black folks. It showed that there was no respect and there was no love that white folks had for us on any level that would be beneficial to our existence here in America. And I really felt the need to fight back. I really thought about becoming a serial killer, getting a gun and going on the roof and just shooting white folks at random, because I felt insulted, felt, like I said, offended by them killing Dr. King. But I called David and I said, listen, that idea of that group, which was, like I said, a year earlier, I said, man, you better do something, because I've got to do something to redeem the death of Dr. King. And so he said, well, don't do nothing crazy, man. He said, don't put your name down. I met this other brother and put his name on the list for us to read poetry at the commemoration of Malcolm X's birthday. And it's going to be held in Mount Morris Park on May 19th, which is actually his birth date. So I chilled out to some extent, but at the same time, I was totally intimidated by the idea that I was going to go on stage in Harlem and read some poetry. I was raised in South Jamaica, Queens. I'd only been in Harlem on the Sundays because I went to church in Harlem at the Southern Baptist Church on 108th Street between Manhattan and Central Park West. And Harlem was kind of intimidating because here black folks, I mean, it was like I thought like almost every place in Harlem was like the amateur night. You know, if you didn't do well and you're on stage, the Sandman's gonna come out and get you. You're gonna be booed back into your home. And so I didn't know what I could possibly say that was going to be appealing to black folks in Harlem. But I did something that was very intelligent, and I'm still doing it now, and I'm proud of myself for doing it. I came to Harlem about 2 weeks before the gig, and I walked around and I listened. I just listened to what was happening. I listened to black people having conversations with each other. I observed, I watched black folks move about. And there was a buzz line that the brothers would say to other brothers, like, what's your thing, brother? But so I'm a Black Panther. They said, well, what's your thing, brother? Well, I'm in the Nation of Islam. So I realized quickly that to say what's your thing, it was like, what is your revolutionary affiliation? What is your affiliation with the movement? And it always, what we say to each other on the street, a lot of times parallels with some of our music. The song out at that time was Yazi Brothers, It's Your Thing, do what you want to do. So it all worked in concert. And I wrote a poem, my very first poem in the last post was entitled, What is Your Thing, Brother? And is it a black thing? Will it save black women and children? Will it build a black nation? What is your thing? So that was I wouldn't say it was a poetic gem, but I was hitting all of the points that we were trying to make back at that time. I was questioning the reality of our movement and trying to get brothers and sisters both to recognize what we needed to do to make this happen, to make things happen in our favor. So I was prepared and to go on stage, and I felt pretty confident about the piece. There was a slight touch of insecurity, I suppose, but I knew I could. I had a voice. I knew I could deliver, and I had my poem memorized. We went to David's house, which was like right across the street from Mount Morris Park, and I met Garland Kane. Garland Kane was a poet who I just met. David had met him at Columbia at a reading at Columbia University some time before, and he had a poem entitled "Niggas Are Untogether People," and it was the first time I ever heard the word "niggers" in any kind of poem. But Kane had a way of making poetry out of anything. I mean, he's a tremendous poet. David had a poem entitled "Are You Ready, Black People?" But now, in order to confirm that we were a group, I felt we needed to go on stage and we needed to sing together or something, as opposed to just walking up on stage as three individuals. I mean, but like go on the stage like we are a unified group. But I tried to think of a song, something that we could sing, but David really didn't have a voice to sing. Kane couldn't hold a note if he handed it to him. I was the only one that could really sing. But there was a chant that I'd heard being used by Howard University students about sometime before that, maybe a week or so before this gig. At Howard University back in '68, they were very upset with the president. His name was Nesbitt, and they wanted him out. They didn't like him. He was a black guy, but he wasn't doing, as far as the students were concerned, he wasn't doing them justice. So they had an effigy of him hanging from a tree on the campus, and the students were marching around the effigy, and they were saying, beep, beep, bang, bang, Ungawa, black power, beep, beep, bang, bang, Ungawa, black power. And then they would change up and say, are you ready, niggas? You got to be ready. Are you ready, niggas? And I was really blown away when I heard that, because I never heard the word niggas ever said on TV as blatantly as that was being said. And it was really kind of surprising. But at this moment now, we're getting ready to do something in Harlem, and we needed to have something to bring us together as a group. So I had David and Kane say they agreed with me that they could chant, are you ready, niggas? You have to have a voice to chant. So we went on stage chanting, are you ready, niggas? By the time we got to the middle of the stage, everybody in the park was chanting, are you ready, niggas? I mean, it was a catchphrase right away that the folks fell in line with. The interesting thing was there's a brother named Hakeem he had a African dance group. They were performing just before we went on stage, and they were breaking this stuff down and getting ready to go off the stage. And I didn't know Hakeem, but I just kind of stopped him and said, you know, play behind us. I felt like having some kind of a rhythmic instrument playing underneath us would help. I mean, it was just a hunch, but he did. He played behind us, and so we didn't have any equipment, we didn't have anything but just ourselves. But we were affirmed immediately. The people appreciated us. We came on real strong. Kane did his poem, Niggas Are Together People. David did his poem, Are You Ready Niggas? Are You Ready Black People? And I did my poem, What Is Your Thing, Brother? And we were our impact hit home immediately to the point where we had a gig at New York University the very next week down at Loeb Center. I mean, so we came out of the gate running, and it was serious. And Kane said we should have a place in Harlem that would endear us to the people. So we had a place, and it was called the East Wing. They had the children's school, Jeffrey Canada's school between 5th and Madison is in that space, because there were 2 lofts in that space. Old Trinity's drum and dance studio, and right next to his studio was our loft, which was called the East Wing. It was an L-shaped loft, but there we would have all kinds of workshops, creative writing workshops, political workshops, and we actually would house the National Black Theater. Barbara Antier was doing, I think, her theater company out of her house, came to us and asked us, because she rented space to have her National Black Theater there, and I believe that we were charging her $75 a month, which is like unbelievable when you look at how expensive things are today. But we're talking about 55 years ago. But the National Black Theater was in our space for quite a few years, and having our own space allowed us to produce ourselves in shows. We had many of the great jazz artists come through, Don Pullins and Milford Graves, Albert Isla and his brother, Pharaoh Saunders and Leon Thomas. We did a lot. Matter of fact, one of the biggest shows we had was Leroy Jones, Spirit House Movers and Players. Leroy Jones was before he became Amiri Baraka, and Sun Ra's Orchestra. So Amiri Baraka did his play Black Mass there, and Sun Ra's Orchestra. Sun Ra was something else. He was like from another planet, and his stuff was just very, very avant-garde. But we did a lot of shows there, and we'd have food, we'd have parties. I mean, it was a real cultural enclave for some time, and it gave the Last Poets an indelible etching in the Harlem community, which I felt very, very good about. But and then, as they say, you know, the rest is history. Kane and David and I did not perform. I mean, we performed together, but we never recorded together. Matter of fact, Garland Kane had said if we were not trying to be recording artists. His thing was if we were to record, we would be in the bucket of crap with the rest of everybody else who's trying to get that kind of attention. He said, you know, we're revolutionaries. We're trying to awaken the people. I went along with that because that's what I felt I wanted to be. I wasn't trying to be a recording artist. But it so happened that the group, like everything else, went through certain evolutionary changes. And ironically, the person who had the idea for the group, David Nelson, was the first one to go. And Felipe was waiting in the wings, and he took his space. So now the group was Felipe, myself, and Kane. We performed around the country. We continued. The group still continued to be growing in popularity, and but we still had not recorded. And as time went on, Felipe says, I convinced him he should go to Spanish Harlem and organize his people. I don't remember saying that necessarily, but it's possible, because there was a need for organization all over the place. And Kane was really, I realized he was not as much of a black nationalist as I thought. He was more of an artist and entertainer, and I mean, in terms of wanting to do his poetry and wanting to be a theatrical person. So he went downtown, and I think he had a little a thing called the Blue Gorilla, and something else called the Holy Ghost Fallout Shelter. He had a whole different perspective on what he wanted to do and how he wanted to manifest his particular art form. I was literally left as the last poet. We had the East Wind Associates. These were young men who ran the business end of the last poets, would book the shows and take care of whatever monies, the business part that came with having a space where you got to pay rent and other bills. And so one of the manager, his name was Olamide, Russell Pitchford is his American name, came to me and said, look man, it's time to record an album. And I was still functioning on what Kane had said originally, but when they came to me and said it was time to record an album and that they had somebody interested, my only rebellious statement was, well, I'm not going downtown and try to audition for some white people to determine whether or not we should have it. I said, hey, you gotta go downtown. What happened is the people came uptown, and the person's name was Alan Douglas and his boy Bob Schaefer. And there was a school that still exists in Harlem. It's called IS 201. And that school was constantly used as a place for revolutionary concerts and things. I mean, it seemed like the school was open 24 hours, but it was always available. So I remember we went, me and I put Umar bin Hassan into the group, and I put Jalal into the group. Jalal was somebody, on the first album his name was Alafia, but he became a Sunni Muslim, and his name became Jalal Mansur Nuruddin. And he was always hanging out at the East Wind. Kane hated him because he rhymed everything, and he thought that he called him a nursery rhyming bitch. But I thought his rhymes made sense. And so I listened to him, and we became friends. But so when he had an opportunity, because I wasn't, when Kane left and when Felipe left, I could not see myself being like the Lone Ranger or Last Poet by myself. I wanted to keep that trinity alive. So I put Umar into the group, and then I invited Jalal to be in the group, and Olamide, our manager, decided we should do an album. So we went into a classroom in IS 201 in that school, and I did a poem, Umar did a poem, and Jalal did a poem. And Alan said, man, I'm ready to record whenever you guys are ready. And it was very simple. It was no fanfare. We went down to 54th Street at the Regent Sound Studio. I think it was 54th and 56th Street, but Midtown Manhattan. And we recorded. And I'll never forget when we got there, I could see Jalal was very nervous. He said, what we gonna do? What we gonna do? I said, man, our first set is gonna be the first side of the album, and our second set is gonna be the second side of the album. I mean, it's that kind of academic. We're gonna do what we've always been doing. We're not gonna do anything differently. And so we did just that, and it worked smoothly because we had sets, and we were very good. Our whole sets were already shaped and had impact, so it was not a problem. The one thing that I did add was I'd asked Alan Douglas, I said, listen, when we put the album together, put the words of our poetry on the inside cover, because the way we're talking so fast, I don't think people will understand us, but if they can read and hear us at the same time, they'll get it. Because I remember him asking me, why did you want to do that? And I told him, I said, I think we're talking kind of fast for people to pick it up. And I discovered later on that a lot of artists have done that since. But the Last Poets are the first group, I believe, until somebody proves me wrong, were the very first group to do that in America. My son, when I mentioned it to my son, one of my sons, he did some research and found out that the very first group to ever do that were the Beatles in '66, and it was Sgt. Pepper's was the name of their album. But the Beatles don't live in America, they're from London. So I told Eben, I said, listen, I think that when you research America, you'll find that we were the first ones to do it here in this country. And I'm proud of having done that because I'm an educator. And that is also a wonderful educational tool to teach kids how to read even. We had a classic example of what I'm saying in D.C. We were there being interviewed by this person, by this organization, and it was a radio station, and it was a call-in type of interview. And this woman called in and she says, I want to thank y'all for helping me raise my sons. I have two sons. And so Umar looked at me and said, oh, you got a family over here? I said, no, man. I said, could you explain yourself? He says, well, I had 2 boys. I'm a single mother. And whenever my boys would act up, I'd put them in the room, and I'd just put a speaker in the room, and the only thing they could listen to was Malcolm X and The Last Poets. And the only thing of my son's reading scores went up that year. And when I had them on punishment, I said, that's very, very interesting. But that she would use us for punishing her kids. And I just thought that was kind of like, I felt very, very good about that. But that was one of the aspects, one of the things that we did that I thought was a little bit ahead of what other folks were doing when it came to poetry and recordings and stuff like that. But the group went on to, when we did that first album, and it was before social media, before the onslaught of what we are seeing now with technology, by word of mouth, 1 million copies of that album was sold in a very short period of time. So I felt very, very good about the whole production and result of that album and the group.
All right, thank you very much for that. Can we rewind a little bit? I would like for you to go into how the name came about, The Last Poets.
Well, the name, yeah, as I said, Kane came up with the idea of having a place. David Nelson was one searching for a name. He read a series of poems, because I didn't have any clues of what we could call ourselves. I didn't even give it that much thought. But David read a poem by Sterling Brown Strongman, Keep On Coming. He also read a poem by Margaret Walker, My People. And he read something written by Gwendolyn Brooks. But the poem that caught his interest and that gave us our name was a poem written by a brother from South Africa named Kelpetsi Kokosili. Very few people could say his first name properly. So here in New York City, where he lived for a while, he was known as Little Willie Kokosili. And he had participated in providing some poetry for a phenomenal anthology put together by Larry Neal and Leroy Jones. And the name of that anthology is Black Fire. It could probably be gotten somehow. But it was a very big book, like a Bible of a book. And it had essays, short stories, plays, and many poems by many of the known poets of that particular period. And on page 237, I'm not sure exactly what page, but in that book, there's a poem by Kokosili, and it says, it's called Towards a Walk in the Sun. And in that poem, he's describing how horrible it was for natives of South Africa to live under the apartheid regime. Apartheid was a system that required Africans the natives of Africa to walk around with their IDs. If the police stopped them and they didn't have their ID, they would be thrown directly in jail, and they could stay in jail for an extended period of time. I mean, it was really a very sick system that oppressed the people that were natives of that land. And the oppression was actually sponsored or put on them by people, the Boers, people that came from Europe, and had just come and geared their land, just like the folks from Europe came here and did the same thing in America, as like what happened in Palestine. I mean, this is the MO of white folks in the world as we know it. They come to a place, they take over the land, and they oppress the people. So Kokosili was very upset, and his poetry clearly pointed all that out. And toward the end, you could see that he had come to a point where he was ready to fight back. And so he changed the font to bold letters in the last part of his poem. And he says, this wind you hear is the birth of memory. When the moment hatches in time's womb, there will be no art talk. The only poem you will hear will be the spear point pivoted into the punctured marrow of the villain, and the timeless native sun dancing like crazy to retrieve rhythms of desire fading into memory. David Nelson added, therefore, we are the last poets of the world. So our name was derived from his poem, and we were basically saying that when you hear what we've got to say, be prepared for a revolution, be prepared for a change. If you're not down with the change, and you might have to succumb to the change, because we're coming. This is a final call. I mean, one time we called it Muhammad Speaks, and that paper changed its title to Final Call. Well, our statement is almost in concert with that. We will give you the final message. That's why we say we're the last poets.
That's dope. That's dope. And thank you for that. Can you also speak about what were some of your artistic inspirations?
Amiri Baraka was a big time mentor. He was a basic, because he had done stuff in Newark, New Jersey with his black, he had an album out called Black and Beautiful. I think that came way before the last poets. And he was doing poetry. He had put brass knuckles on the words, and he'd punch you in the face. So he made, because see, poetry before Amiri Baraka and before the last poets was kind of quiet. You would go to the little tea rooms and have tea and sip and eat crumpets and quiet and whisper. But when the movement came in and was beginning to pick up some steam, and poetry became that rallying cry, poetry got loud. Poetry became something like, it's like I said, like we put brass knuckles on the words and punch you dead in the face, made you recognize that no, we have to have something that's going to give us some inspiration and motivation to fight this system, and sometimes you got to fight fire with fire. So that was what the poetry was doing. Askia Muhammad Touré, he was another one of our mentors, and he used to hang out at the Eastwood a lot, and he was a very dear friend of mine and a super poet, another great poet, and he's also in that book Black Fire. Sonia Sanchez was without question one of our mentors. I first read a poem that she had written, and it was in Liberation Bookstore, which was a popular bookstore on 132nd Street in Harlem, on Lenox Avenue, Malcolm X Boulevard. And there was a poster of her in there where she was it was a caricature of her, where she had a nice afro and she had a nice body and she had a sassy pose. She was in a sassy pose, and right next to her caricature, it said, "What does a white girl have that I don't have but her white pussy?" I said, "Whoa! I'd never seen nothing like that." I mean, it was. And I asked Una Mosnick, who was the person in charge of the bookstore, I said, "You could say that in a poem?" And she said, "Sonia can." And I looked down at the bottom and it says, by Sonia Sanchez. That was motivational. And she became one of the people that I looked up to as well as a mentor, even though she probably didn't even realize it. But I was truly struck by that particular poem. And since that time, we've had a conversation at the Schomburg, and I mentioned that to her, and she felt embarrassed because she didn't want that brother to put that poster out, but he did. But Sonia is somebody I talk to her often because I want to let her know how much I love her, and I'm concerned. She's an elder, and she's in Philly, and so I try to stay in touch with her often. But there were quite a few people who I admired, but the ones I mentioned, Askia, Amiri, and Sonia, were probably the top three at that time. I also like Mari Evans. She's a good poet, and there were a number of folks that were saying some stuff, and we had Kwesi Balagoon. He was a poet, and he was a Panther, and he was a fiery poet. I mean, he had some stuff to say that was very, very strong and in your face. There were a number of people, but those three that I mentioned earlier, Miri and Sonia and Askia, probably were the main three. But then the other thing is that when you're a black poet, you're in a black community, black people are poetic, and a lot of times they're not going to sit down and write the poetry that they create. But the idea, if you're a poet and you're writing for black folks, you're going to see the poetry manifest right in front of your face, and you write it, because many of my poems that I've written that are popular were actually written almost like I was a journalist sitting just copying what black folks were saying and putting it in poetic verse so that they could digest it a little better than what they realized.
All right, thank you. How about Nina Simone? Was she
Nina
any
Simone?
influence?
Nina Simone has always been someone who has been revered by me and many others, as we call her, the high priestess of soul. Nina, you see, people don't realize Nina Simone was a child prodigy. She was born with a gift of playing piano, and she was born in North Carolina, and she had a special talent. Her mother would call people over to the house to hear her 9-year-old daughter play Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. She could do all that. Nina got a scholarship to a conservatory at Philadelphia, and she was hoping that she was going to become a known classical piano player, but they never put her on blast. They never gave her a chance to shine. And in a way, I'm very happy they didn't, because she became a rebel. Because she was in a situation where she thought she was going to be treated fairly, and she never was treated fairly. And so she rebelled by becoming the Nina Simone that we all knew and loved. And she became Mississippi Goddamn. She started writing stuff that was that affected her, because she had been racially treated, and so she became a backlash to the racism, and it started when she was in the conservatory. Matter of fact, on her album Emergency Ward, she is doing one of the poems written by one of the last poets written by David Nelson, and the title of the poem is "Today Is a Killer," and she actually sings it, because Nina had an uncanny way of taking some poetry and turning it into music. She did Backlash Blues, which is a Langston Hughes piece, and she sings it because Nina had that gift to do that. And she's the only piano player that you're ever going to hear, and she was a tremendous piano player. But she could play some bluesy stuff, and in the middle she could insert some Bach or Beethoven, and you wouldn't realize it. She just threw some super classical European stuff in the middle of a black bluesy piece, but she had that gift, and she never let it go. She just applied it in places where she felt it would be effective. And I happened to, I knew Nina Simone. David knew her too. That's how she got a hold of his poem. But we did a concert together some years ago. It was in the 70s. It was in the 70s. It was either 70s or early 80s at the Beacon Theater. I had a jazz group called Griot, and it was in the 80s, I think it was. Robert Van Leeuwen, a brother here in Harlem, had some influence and some money. He was sponsored it, and it was at the Beacon Theater on 72nd and Broadway, and we had a chance to perform on the same stage with Nina. She was, of course, the feature, and my group kind of opened up for her. But it was a special moment because I got a chance to. I also got a chance to recognize the paradox of Nina Simone, because she had some issues. She was not an easy person to work with, but extremely talented. And the talent and her gift is something I will always admire. And the fact is that she has one of the greatest introductions to a song, a piece that many black folks are aware of that I've never heard. She has an album called Black Gold, and it's just a silhouette of her on the cover. And she is getting ready to sing a song written by a good friend of mine who passed away named Weldon Irvine. Weldon Irvine had written this song called Young, Gifted, and Black. And Nina Simone is doing this song with the Philadelphia Mass Choir. And Nina always attracted a lot of white folks. It's like the white folks would come to her concerts almost to get spanked for some reason or another, because she was going to spank them. And she wasn't going to be endearing to them. But they would come and take that spanking. But she says in the beginning before she sings Young, Gifted, and Black, she says, "The song I'm about to sing is not a protest song against any of the white members of the audience. It simply ignores you." And she goes into the song, "To be young, gifted, and black." I thought that was a great introduction, because what that statement says, you can hurt these people. We can hurt our oppressors much more by ignoring them as opposed to going along with them or trying to fight and argue with them, because they're children. And the worst thing you can do for a child is to not give that child attention. Like Donald Trump is the biggest child in America running for president after all the stuff he's done, and all he really wants is attention. He doesn't care if you curse him out. Just keep his name in your mouth. He doesn't care if you like him or hate him. As long as you got him in your brain, he's good to go. And of course, he's a germ, and it doesn't matter. The germ doesn't care if you take medicine, try to get rid of it. As long as that germ is there, then he's going to be a factor in everything, and that's what he's concerned with. But he's a child. We need to unplug our cords out of their sockets and plug into each other, and that's what the '60s were really about in many ways. When we stopped trying to wear their hair looking like them, when we started wearing African clothes, when we started changing our names, a lot of white folks became totally afraid, because it appeared that we were going back to Africa. The very thing that they tried to erase from our minds, we were reclaiming. all this, we had brought the drums out. We were not allowed to play the drums when they first brought us here. If they caught you playing the drums, you get your hands cut off in public. They would chop your hands off. If you spoke a language that didn't sound like English, they'd cut your tongue out your mouth. They were so afraid. And of course, everybody knows that there was a law. You could not teach black people how to read. They knew how brilliant we were. They knew that if you give us an inch, we're going to take a couple of miles. Because they didn't go over there and get a bunch of ragamuffins. They got some very prime royal people from the motherland, and it was much more than to pick cotton and tobacco and indigo. They got us to give them civilization, to teach them how to be human beings. And we don't understand that. But they did it with one theme in mind. They brought us here to serve them and then die. We were not here to serve and raise and thrive on our own. We were here to serve them and die. In any situation where we started thriving, like Black Wall Street, for example, and Rosewood, there were a number of cities and towns where we left them alone and we started plugging into each other. They would bomb us. They would kill us. They'd find a way to wipe that out, burn the towns down, just because that's not what we were for. And they know that if we are left alone, if we work within ourselves, we can create a paradise for each other. They don't want that. They want us to be miserable and provide them with everything that we can have so that they can live lovely. So that's why they have us working in their house. That's why they'll have us driving their cars. That's why they're going to bring their baby out of that big old mansion and bring him to the shack so that Sadie can put her breast in that baby's mouth. That tells you everything you need to know. They look forward to us giving them life. And if we took that away from them, they would be just like what would happen to a balloon when you take out the air. They would be flat, and there wouldn't be no more white folks to even be concerned with. But some of us actually act like we're obligated to take care of this white man. We're obligated to get his approval before we do anything. If we don't get his approval, we just are not doing it the right way. We're not doing it the white way, and we need to recognize that way is no way for us. I always have tried to do stuff to get my people to appreciate me. I could care less if white folks care about me or love me. I want my folks to love me because I love my people.
That's what's up. That's what's up. Thank you very much. Can you also speak about the Black Arts Movement, the influence of the Black Arts Movement or affiliation?
The Black Arts Movement was another example of us recognizing that we had a movement that we need to propel, that we need to promote, because you have all your impressionist movements and all other kinds of movements that white folks would. If we went to college, you had to learn about all of their particular movements, the Renaissance and the Impressionist movement and this movement and so forth. Then there's the beat movement of the beat poets like Ferlinghetti and Allen Ginsberg and all those characters. But there was nothing to highlight what we had done in that world of art. So now, once again, we are illuminating, we're putting a light on our contributions, on our creativity. And the Black Arts Movement was a perfect example of us shining. We had a group of visual artists here in Harlem called the Wayusi Artists. Phenomenal. These were to our Gaylord Hassan and Adibola, who's still with us, and Abdul Rahman, and just a bunch of Scipio. And we had a bunch of great artists who did phenomenal work on canvas, and they were highlighted because of the Black Arts Movement. The Last Poets, we were part of that Black Arts Movement, as well as other poets and musicians. It was a very rich, culturally elevating time for us because we were affirming and acknowledging our existence. You're not going to get acknowledgement from your oppressor. They're going to do everything they can in their power to make you not appear even in existence unless they sponsor you. If they sponsor you, that means they got the control and they're going to get the credit primarily. We were not looking for sponsorship. We were pumping the volume ourselves and we were making it happen. And folks fell in line. A number of places emerged from our movements. The East Wind was one place. Of course, in Brooklyn it was called the East. And in those places we continue to perpetuate our culture and share that and shine a light on what we were capable of doing. Then we had different clothing shops like that came about, where kente cloth became a fabric that many folks started dealing with and recognizing the value of, and we realized that we had a whole culture that had been totally neglected, and in many ways it had been hidden from us. Erase that from our minds and our hearts. We were making it clear through our Black Arts movement that is still a vital part and the most vital part of our existence.
Yes. Thank you for that. Also, you mentioned Malcolm X earlier. Y'all are known as, not y'all, the Last Poets are known as the poetical sons of Malcolm X. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, I've always said that we're like the poetic disciples of Malcolm mainly because we started on his birthday, and it gave us a big lift because the thing that made Malcolm, for me, what made him even more important than Martin Luther King was born almost with a silver spoon in his mouth. His mother was a teacher, his daddy was a preacher. So he never experienced poverty. He never experienced going through a bunch of evolutionary changes. And plus, he was very well read. The brother graduated from high school at 15, graduated from Morehouse at 19. He was finished with his entire education. He was Dr. King at the age of 26. A whole lot of people don't become that until they were in their late 20s or early 30s. But he had finished his whole educational experience because he had certain things that were handed to him. Nothing was handed to Malcolm. Malcolm had to go the rough road. And his life itself is nothing but a super poem. He's born Malcolm Little. You can't make this up. That was his name, Malcolm Little. He happened to witness, him and his mother and his sisters and brothers witnessed their father's head being run over on the train tracks down there in Omaha, Nebraska. And then they moved to Lansing, Michigan. The bottom line is that he went through some changes. And each of the changes that he went through, he was in school in Lansing, and when the teacher asked, what do you want to do with your life? And Malcolm said, I want to be a lawyer. The teacher said, niggas can't be no lawyers. So he was kicked in the face educationally and a whole bunch of other ways. Then he became a hustler. He became Detroit Red, and he even came here to Harlem. And every time Malcolm evolved from one person to the next, he had a name that went along with that evolution. So we know the 5 names of Malcolm: Malcolm Little, Detroit Red. Then he became Satan when he was in prison because he was mean and he had that red hair. And nobody was running upon Malcolm in Detroit because he could fight, and he was not one of those people to back down. And plus, he was serious, and they knew that too. You could feel his seriousness. And because of his brother Reginald, he actually got in touch with Elijah Muhammad, and Elijah Muhammad became his surrogate dad while he was in prison, and that's when he became Malcolm X. And we all know that the X always stands for the unknown, and so we didn't know our names. They separated us, and we came from different tribes, and none of us know. So the X became a real factor. And then after that, he became a Sunni Muslim. Actually, got more involved in Islam and became Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. But there was another name that people tend to leave out because he went to West Africa, and they gave him a name when he was over there, Omar Wale, and that was another name that should be inserted into the evolution because he kept evolving, and in each of his evolutionary stages, there was a name that accompanied him, and that's one of the reasons why I love him, because we always tell people before a revolution takes place, there's got to be an evolution. Some black folks are not ready for revolution because the revolution is about change. You can't tell me you're ready for change if you're doing the same old habits that you had before. Change, you got to prepare yourself for change. When you say and I always say the revolution starts with you turning yourself inside of yourself and then trying to change the disorder that exists within you. And if you do that, that means you stop smoking, you might change your diet, you might start listening to different music, but those things take time for you to actually grow into a new self. And Malcolm was constantly reinventing himself and trying to grow and understand the growth of his existence and the value of it at the same time. I love Malcolm just because he was a black man who found a way to take steps to arrive to a point where he could feel proud of himself in a place where pride is hard to find.
All right, thank you. In previous interviews, you've mentioned that you saw Malcolm as a child, right?
I saw Malcolm when I was a child. I never had a chance to speak with him. I was in the back seat of my father's car. Every Sunday after we had church services at Southern Baptist, we go to our baby's house. That's what they called my aunt. I was my father's sister, older sister. Evidently, when she was born, she was a baby, so they called the baby. So her name Baby Sid. So she was Aunt Baby, but her name was Irene Houston. And this particular day, we were on 7th Avenue, and I saw a crowd of people on the corner, and I saw a man. From where I was sitting, he looked like he was orange. I mean, he didn't look like any color of a man I'd seen. He had an orange kind of glow. And I remember my aunt saying to my mother, "You see that man over there talking? They're going to kill that man." And he's telling the truth. And because I was raised under the banner that children should be seen and not heard, and I guess I was 12 or 13, I don't know, I was young, I could not interrupt that conversation and say, why are they going to kill him? Because he's telling the truth. I wanted to say something because I know for a fact if I didn't tell the truth, I was going to get a whooping. And this man's telling the truth, and they're going to kill him? It didn't make sense to me. But a few years down the line, while I was in high school, Malcolm was assassinated. And my teacher, Ann Carpenter, who was one of the founding members of Harlem Prep, and her and her husband, Ed Carpenter, my homeroom teacher, Miss Ann Carpenter, she gave us a holiday. Malcolm was killed on a Sunday. That Monday, my teacher said, "I'm giving you all permission to go home because a great man was killed yesterday." That's when I became more aware of Malcolm. I saw him, and I remember the statement my aunt made, and now my teacher has nothing but reverence for this man that was killed. And then when I went to college my first year in '66, I was 67. The guy that was the head of the recreation department of the double block recreational and educational program, a white guy named Michael Gorkin, was working under David Nelson as well, because David was the director. Michael Gorkin went to the University of Iowa, and I was going to Drake University. So we both ended up in Iowa, and I remember Michael saying to me, "Yo, if you come to the University of Iowa, which was in Iowa City, and you meet some girls, you want to hang out, you want a place to chill, I have an apartment, I can go to my girlfriend's crib, but just let me know." So me and my friend Abdul, a brother had befriended from Kuwait. He had a lot of money. I didn't realize his father made oil cans, but he had a bunch of money. And we drove into the University of Iowa, in Iowa City, and I called up Michael, and he made arrangements for me to get the keys under the doormat to his apartment. And I remember going to his apartment, and I had this sister with me, and Abdul, he had an Egyptian sister with him. And when I got into the kitchen, on the table was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And he had a note that said, "You should read this book." This is a Jew guy, Michael Gorkin. He said, "You should read this. I think you'll find it quite interesting." And even though I was at Michael's house for romantic purposes and for having a good time, there was no romance that weekend. I read the book the entire weekend. I was so taken by it. Alex Haley did a hell of a job of making it clear as who Malcolm was. And that book still resonates with me today because what he said about Malcolm and how Malcolm, like when I mentioned all the changes, the phases, every one of the phases that he went through, Alex Haley captures in the book. So Autobiography of Malcolm X is a book for people that want to be aware of Malcolm. Read that book and you become very, very aware. So Malcolm became somebody that I began to revere more so than Martin, as I said earlier, because of the evolution that he went through and the fact that he was also very loyal. It hurt him to his heart to know that some of the young women that he was sending to Chicago to become Muslim women were being violated by the man that he had revered so much, the messenger. I mean, this man is like in his 70s and he's taking these young women and having sex and getting them pregnant. It really hurt Malcolm's heart. And being that he was a Taurus, and anybody knows anything about Taurians, they have a loyalty that is right in line with their passion. And that's, if you don't have, so he felt like this man who I've looked up to, I've seen as a father figure, he's violated the very rule of manhood, as far as I'm concerned, by doing this. So the conflict between Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm ensued, and everybody knows that was a part of his demise.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. And also, can you mention some of the artists that have been directly inspired or influenced, or you have worked with, such as Gil Scott-Heron and others?
Gil Scott-Heron, we met. We had a gig. The Last Poets had a gig at Lincoln University back in the. It was in 68, I believe. Could have been early 69, but it was at Lincoln. And after I think he was the brother that brought us on stage, because he was popular in the school because he had been writing, and he was known as Sticks, because he's a skinny guy, but he had a lot of energy and a lot of talent, and he put it on display. And I remember him coming back to our dressing room, or where we had our stuff organized. I said, "Man, I want to have a group just like you guys." And I told Gil, I said, "Man, go for it. We want Last Poets all over the world," because it was more than just the name of a group. It was a philosophy, as I explained before. And Gil went for it, and he started his own group, and I appreciate him for that. And we became very good friends. And matter of fact, about 2 years before he died, the Last Poets and Gil Scott-Heron had a concert at the Carter Barron Amphitheater in D.C., in Washington, D.C. And it was supposed, I remember the forecast was rain, and Charlotte Fox was the sister that produced it, and she says, "You know, it's supposed to rain today, and the amphitheaters are outside, you know, there's no roof." And so I said, that would be a real bummer. Man, it maybe a little sprinkles here and there, but we had at least almost 2,000 people show up. And they were there. Forget about the rain. If it was going to rain, it's just going to rain on everybody, going to get blessed by water. And we had a beautiful performance, I'll never forget. And Gil didn't have the band with him. It was just Gil by himself with piano. He engaged people in conversation. He did some of his known poems like H2O Blues. I mean, and Gil was a consummate performer. He really, and he had that magnetism. He could capture your attention easily. It was no problem. It was no struggle. And I appreciated watching him perform. Then the Last Poets performed. Then afterwards, the paparazzi had us on stage. I stayed on stage, and Gil, and we were sitting there. And this guy says, "Well, Gil, I've got Abiodun, founding member of the Last Poets here, along with you. Tell us, are you a Last Poet?" And Gil said, "Yes, I'm a Last Poet." And the guy looks at me as if to get confirmation. I said, "Yes, he's the Last Poet." I said, "No, he's not functioning in the group, but philosophically, he's a Last Poet." So he says, "Well, what about him biting off of your poem?" I said, "Biting off my poem? What are you talking about?" He says, "That's the problem. We can't teach white folks our language because they started misusing it." He says, "Well," he said, "you wrote a poem about the revolution in television, and Gil does the same thing." I said, "Oh my God." I said, "He was not," I said, "Listen," I said, "when the revolution comes, some of us will probably catch it on TV with chicken hanging from our mouths. You'll know it's revolution because there won't be no commercials." Yes, Gil heard that poem and he was smitten by it. But he went into his space and he said, "The revolution will not be televised." I said, "He graduated my poems, mister." I said, "Why are you trying to create a conflict between me and Gil?" I said, "Gil's my brother. We don't have no conflict." I said, "We stand on the shoulders of each other." I said, "We're going to watch it with chicken hanging from our mouths." I killed the commercials. And as far as Gil is concerned, forget just killing the commercials. Kill TV altogether. And you're up here trying to create I'm not trying to create a conflict. I said, "Yes, you are. You said two things that would be conflicting if I hadn't stopped you." I said, "I'm not having that. Gil's my brother. Let's just make that clear." You know, and it's so funny because Gil and I were together at the Black Arts Conference down in Atlanta, Georgia, some years later, and a brother ran up to him and said, "Gil, man, I love you, man. When the revolution comes." And Gil said, "Right on." And I just looked at Gil. We both kind of smiled. 20 minutes later, brother runs up to me and said, "Dude, Last Poets, revolution will not be televised." I said, "Right on." Because if people get those poems confused, that's okay. The main thing is you heard them, and you were affected by it. You know, Gil was an artist that I love. Another one of the artists that I had great reverence for was Leon Thomas. I wish I could yodel like him. Oh my God. And he sung one of my favorite songs that I sing every chance I get. The Creator Has a Master Plan. Are you kidding me? I've sung, if there's a band anywhere in America that's black and that's got any kind of jazz impressions or knows some music, I'll ask them point blank, can you know the bass line for The Creator? And I fly with that. Leon found out that I was singing this song all over the place. Says, yeah, I hear you singing my song. Well, I said, you can't do it because he'd been messing with those drugs. And they had changed his whole thing. I remember when I did it in BAM in Brooklyn, Ron Carter, one of our great jazz bass players, was playing behind me, and I was happy because Ron Carter is a bomb. And so Ron asked me, he says, June, I know you are going to do some poetry, but I also know you like to sing. What are you going to sing? I said, I'm going to do The Creator. I said, I know you know the bass line. He says, are you talking about Love Supreme? I said, what? It's the same bass line. I said, what? And I didn't realize that. So Ron gave me an education about the bass line. It's The Love Supreme by Train and The Creator Has a Master Plan. They share the same bass line. So Leon Thomas and Phil Saunders were two artists that I truly appreciated very, very much. And then there was, of course, I could never forget Nina Simone. Because Nina Simone, what I loved about Nina is that when she sung a song, she took on the persona of the song itself. I mean, when she's singing Pirate Jenny, she sounded like a subversive revolutionary getting ready to do some damage. She had that haunting tone in her voice. When she sang Four Women, she sounded like all the four women that she's talking about in that song. She would give you the personality in her interpretation of the song better than any artist I've ever heard. Nina could just morph herself into the personality of whatever lyrics she was singing. She would become those lyrics. I mean, she was rich in terms of her spirit and her feelings and how she admitted what she had to sing or say. I had nothing but reverence for her. She was crazy. She has her issues, and I experienced that as well, but the fact is that I would never take away, I could never deny the phenomenal talent that she represented. I had other artists that I loved as well. Of course, when I was in the 70s, when the Black Jazz label came out, and that was an amazing thing to me. It came out of Brooklyn, and I heard Gene Carn singing Infant Eyes. Oh my God! So it was like Doug and Gene Carn became people that I really admired. Of course, they were tremendous artists. Gene could sing in 5 octaves, and I mean her voice was just like a prayer. And so that's somebody else I had great reverence for. There were a number of course, John Coltrane always. Matter of fact, I would do workshops in creative writing, and I would actually put on like Ascension by John Coltrane, and I would say all these black jazz artists are poets, but they're poets in sound. They're not going to necessarily give you a poetry text in words, but they're going to give you a title of a song, and then they're going to tell you their poem in a sound. I said that's their masters of sound. So, but since you're into the writing words down, I want you to listen to Train's Ascension and write down in words what you think he's trying to say. So I had a bunch of folks interpreting from the sound what Train was doing. Phenomenal. I mean, I haven't used that particular scheme lately, but that was a very effective way to get some poetry out of my students, and at the same time introduce them to music at the same time. We did that also with Herbie Hancock's Maiden Voyage, and another piece I used to use was "Speak Like a Child" by Herbie Hancock, "Speak Like a Child," and Herbie Hancock's Maiden Voyage. We did that, and there was another artist that I admired too, Kaya, out of D.C. I can't remember his first name. Terry Kaya. he had a piece called Occasional Rain, which I thought was a poetic gem. I mean, because in life, that's what you're going to get, occasional rain, which is like, some little change in the weather pattern. And he also had a piece called Ordinary Joe. I mean, his lyrics were very poetic. Another one of the artists that I truly revered, and even to this very day, Oscar Brown Jr. Billy Brebb, Signifying Monkey, and he has a piece called which again is an example of how sounds we make have great definition. Because in the track, it's a brother that goes up to his sister. She's standing at a bar. She's fine as could be. She's gorgeous. And the brother goes up to him and he pulls out a big wad of money, trying to show off the fact that he's got some cash. And then he starts telling his sister, like, I want to take you to Paris and buy you some clothes and just take you on a whole rendezvous of all of France, and maybe we'll have a personal little jet plane. And he just started talking about all this phenomenal stuff he wanted to do. And she looks at him and turns, and very so slightly she turns her head towards him and says, And then he realized maybe I could say something else. So he keeps on writing these things down that he wants to do to entertain her. And all she ever says is, So I asked my sister, now who said more, him or her? And the sisters always get it. They say she said a lot with what she said. And it was just true. Because was like simply saying, I know you're telling me stories and I'm not buying none of it, But Oscar Brown Jr. had a way of capturing the essence of black folks in his work. And I had nothing but reverence for his ability and how he told stories in poetic ways. He was one of the original storytellers as well. Eddie Jefferson is another one. I mean, I look forward to listening to Frankie Crocker, because Frankie Crocker, when he had his radio show, he'd always end it with, there I go, there I go, there I go. And that was Moody's Mood for Love. And another one of the artists who I happen to know in my lifetime and have mad respect for, even though he's another crazy person, Miles Dewey Davis. Miles Davis was special, and I knew him because I used to actually, one of my girlfriends back in the day happened to be Marlena Franklin, and she's the daughter of Cicely Tyson. She mentions her in her book, but she refers to her as Joan. Cicely did not have a daughter named Joan. Her daughter's name was Marlena Franklin, and it caused Cicely Tyson and her mother to kind of, there was a division between them. They stopped talking to each other because Cicely put her daughter in a Catholic convent for them to raise her when she went out to Hollywood to become an actress. Her mother did not like that, and she did not want Cicely going to Hollywood because she felt that was the devil's playground. But Cicely was hell-bent on getting into Hollywood stuff, and put Marlena in the Catholic convent, where, of course, she had been violated by one of the priests and all that stuff. I mean, I happened to meet her at a poetry reading. There was a place in Harlem called the Liberty House, and it had a lot. And Yvette, the sister that ran the place, she would have in the back, because the Liberty House were places that were set up by Jews who would take handicrafts made by black folks in the South, and they would sell those handicrafts like, pot holders and carvings and, name anything that you could make with your hand. They would give the people down there a nominal fee, and then they put them in these stores around the city. They have two here in New York, one downtown and one in Harlem, and it was called Liberty House. And Yvette would use her Liberty House not only to offer us those handicrafts, but in the back she had space, and there she'd have poetry readings. And in that poetry readings that she had in the back, I'd always try to be there because I felt very insecure about my poetic skills, because I wasn't raised, a lot of things that I didn't know, and I was trying to learn on the fly. So I was constantly going to readings and just trying to just get as much information as I could. And so that was another part of my growth. And then when Yvette had the space, I actually had a chance to see some of the poets that I appreciated. Jackie Early, Nikki Giovanni, she had just come into town and she was on that bill. Ed Spriggs, He was a poet that was pretty good, and Marvin X, Askia Muhammad Toure. Matter of fact, that was one of the moments that Askia had done this poem about John Coltrane that it kind of blew me away, because talked about Train and how he always saw a picture of Train. It looked like he was in deep thought. And he says, you know, he had that little crease in the middle of his forehead, like he was thinking intensely about something. He said, but have you ever seen him smile? And it was deep, because you don't see too many pictures of Train smiling. He always looks serious. And he said, have you ever seen that sweet potato pie smile? And when he said that, it hit me like, whoa! And I made a statement. I said, whoa! But the people, like, this was just, I guess, still coming out of that period where poetry was kind of quiet, because everybody turned and looked at me like I was out of order. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, I blurted out this sound because of the poem, and people look at me like I've just done something wrong. Anyway, that was another episode. I wrote a poem about those folks, and it became a real moment where Nikki and I didn't talk to each other for years behind that, because she felt that I had bum rushed myself in her poetry reading. She wasn't the only one reading poetry, because that poem became extremely popular, and she didn't like that. And I guess her ego was hurt, but it was a moment that I clearly remember. Matter of fact, I remember the poem because and it's a poem I've never done with the Last Poets, but the one thing I will say is that the gods have blessed me with a memory. I can remember poems I wrote in high school. Another day, this poem was called Another Day, Another Time. Another day, another time, and the shit piles up as if everybody's got diarrhea. There ain't no revolution. Just some rebels standing outside in the blizzard trying to keep warm while you neo-Negroes play black, shoveling the shit from the street to the table, trying to intellectualize the nature of things. Ooh, that's deep. Ooh, that's real deep. It ought to be deep. The shit's been piling up for 400 years. Another day, another time, and brothers talk about organization, revolution, go home and rotate their dead dicks and gefunke fish cunts or puss-faced bitches. Chains are wrapped around their hands and their feet and stuck in their minds, and yet they can instruct you and me on how to be free. Another day, another time, and afro heads with swayed pussies trying to cut your thing off, talking about liberation or masturbation. Another day, another time, and the trains roll down the same tracks. Only the names of the stops have changed. Every now and then someone gets off the train and unloads a pile of shit. The nouveau wares scoop it up and pass it out, stamping on it a revolutionary package for the blind. Now I wrote it about those particular people in that space at that time, and they wanted me to do the poem again. Nobody identified with the poem. They just thought it was a great poem. And then Yvette said to me, since you wrote that in the Liberty House, you should dedicate it to Liberty House. So I said, well, let me take it home and type it up. I did. I took it home, I typed it up, and I came back. The Wednesday when I came back to give the poem to Yvette, who ran the Liberty House, I see the little green bug drive up to the front of the place. And I knew it was Nikki because we all knew her car. She had a green Volkswagen. And she gets out the car and she comes into the store and says, it's brothers like you that are going to stop us from ever having a revolution or us being unified. Come barging in on other people's readings. And I have to be honest, I went nigger on her. I said, bitch, I'll fuck you up. Because she approached me wrong. I denied wanting to even do the poem about 4 or 5 times. Askia made me get up and do it. Because the sister, the brother that was Yvette's assistant, I think his name was Jonathan, I'm not sure of his name, but he was her assistant. He had said, well, I saw Abiodun, one of the young guns in poetry here in Harlem, writing a piece, maybe he'll come up and share with us. I was in the audience, I was a guest. I had not come there ready to recite anything. And I said, no, I said, I got to work on it. I said, it's a work in progress. I tried my best to get out of it. And then Askia said, oh, come on up here, man, read the poem. So I got up, and I had written a song the week before. So I said, well, I got this brand song, and I shared the song. But the poem was bulging out of my pocket because I written it on a paper bag because that was the only thing near me. And so you could see the big bulge in my pocket. And the kid said, man, the poem's right there, man. Just pull that poem out and read it. I said, oh, my God. So I did it, and they loved it. I could not believe it. I thought they were going to hate me for that. But they didn't identify with it. They didn't think I was talking about them, I guess. I don't know what the deal was. But then Nikki showed her butt by telling me that I was the reason that we're never going to be successful as revolutionaries or whatever, because I'm barging in on people's readings. And for quite a few years, we didn't talk to each other because of that incident. And that's not my style. I'm not the kind of person to barge in on anybody. I would never do that. I was raised with serious manners, and the one thing that I know about myself is that I'm not that kind of abrasive person. That's never been me, and it never will be me.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And you were speaking about some of the artists y'all worked with. I know that there's a song with the Last Poets and Jimi Hendrix. Can you speak about how that came about?
Well, Jimi Hendrix, I had a chance to speak to him in Alan Douglas's office one time, and he loved our album, and he really felt that we should do something together. I never had a chance to do, but I believe Jalal had a chance to do something with him before he checked out, because he spoke with him much more in more depth than I did. I just told Jimi Hendrix that I just thought that he was a great guitar player, and I said to him, I said, you must have started out playing the blues, and sure enough, he had. Most of the great artists, especially coming from that part of the country, started out playing. Well, he's from Seattle, but they all started out playing the blues because that was the music that was available to us, and he extended beyond that, and he made the wah-wah pedal a classic. And a lot of people, that was kind of new, and that was a pedal that kind of echoed the sound. And Jimmy was an innovator. But like everybody knew, there was never a drug that he did not like. He was it was a pill or a snip, whatever it was, Jimmy would try it. And so he had this little fetish for drugs, which of course led to an early departure. But yeah, I would have loved to have had an opportunity to do something with him. But Jalal, I believe he did do something. I know that there was a great kinship between us and Jimmy.
Right. Thank you. I know you definitely recorded with Jimmy's band members, the Aleems, who those are actually my elders who introduced me to the music.
The Aleems, yes. I did. Matter of fact, when I first got back to Harlem, I'm walking down 125th Street, right near the Apollo, and I ran into Tarak Tahaka and Tuniran. And I call them like the Conan twins because they both were built, they had dreadlocks, and they just looked foreboding. I mean, just fierce brothers. And the brothers said, Abiodun. They stopped me. And I said, yeah. I said, man, when you get back? And I told them how I've been back. And he said, well, you writing anything? I said, yeah. And I had just written this piece called The Super Horror Show. And so they said, well, man, we got to record that. I didn't realize there was a recording studio in the Apollo, right upstairs in the same building. So they took me up there, and they had access to it, and I recorded Super Horror Show. I remember most of it, just a little sample. It's a super horror show, don't you know? It's a chiller thriller, and sure enough the killer. It's a super horror show, don't you know? It's a chiller thriller, and sure enough the killer. Man running down the street with a butcher knife says he don't give a damn, he's gonna kill his wife. People running just to see if the man's for real. Take it best on the side to see if she'll be killed. It's a super horror show, don't you know? It's a chiller thriller, and sure enough the killer. Hey, what's happening to all the men? Queer queen of the crop, don't you know it's a sin? Got great big feet and big old hands, acting like a girl when you should be a man. Saw you at a bar, sipping a drink with your butt poked out, all dressed in pink. The brother takes a side, walked over by your side, took a look at your face and wanted to run and hide. It's a super horror show, don't you know? It's a chiller thriller, and showing up the killer. Test tube, baby trying to rock the house. Nobody seem to know what it's all about. Real people in a minute are gonna be rare just because somebody forgot how to care. Brothers in the war don't know what for. Sisters on the street trying to make a score. Sons mugging mothers, sisters, brothers. People living lives created by others. Everybody's got a mask on their face with green, greedy eyes and yellow taste. Long yellow fangs hanging down past the lip. So, everybody's got a mask on their face with green, greedy eyes and bloody taste. Long yellow fangs hanging down past your lip. Beside high five like everything's here. Better party, no less with all the rest. Smoking that dust don't make you the best. It distorts your head, makes you act kind of strange, eats away your mind and drives you insane. Super horror show, don't you know? It's a chiller thriller and showing enough for killer. Unfreak the freak, stop up that leak. All the hinges so the door don't creak. Take off the mask and let's make a face where the sun is shining all over the place. In the super horror show, don't you know? 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 So I remember the piece. that was a piece that they recorded. We actually got a lot of play in Philly. We performed at a couple places, but Philadelphia was the biggest performance. Was at some spot where there were a whole bunch of young people, about 2,000 or 3,000, bunch of young folks, and it was like a hip hop thing, more or less. So that was my contribution to hip hop, because they felt like since we were the people that laid the foundation for that, we should ride on that wave, and that was my introduction to it. When Tahaka, I think it was Tahaka, whichever one of the twins died, they had the funeral over here at the Corinthian. All the kids, the nephews, they all were saying Super Hard Show when they saw me, and I freaked out because I didn't know, but I should have known that they knew that because of their relatives. But yeah, that was my contribution. I love the Aline brothers. We had such a wonderful moment in time. It was a short period of time we knew each other, but it was a very impacting moment. And they will always be in my heart because of that particular piece. And the fact is that we just, the chemistry was right. Yeah.
Thank you. Was there ever an affiliation with the Last Poets and James Brown, which I'm sure?
No, I never had anything to do with James Brown. I appreciated what he did with Black and Proud, of course, even though I heard that he was made to do that because before he put out Black and Proud, he had said something about being more congenial with America, and at the time we weren't trying to be congenial with America. So some people in his camp or people around him said, you got to come stronger than that. This is a different period. I don't know if that was his line or somebody gave him the line, but we all appreciated him saying "Say It Loud" on Black and I'm Proud because that was a strong statement from one of our super artists. And God knows James Brown was probably at the top of the charts for a long time as far as the black community is concerned, because he was first of all, I don't know anybody who could work as hard as he did on stage. I saw James Brown at the Apollo, and when he did Please, Please, and he'd be breaking down, and he'd be on his knees, and then somebody come out with a cape and put it around him, and then he'd get up and break off the cape and just go back and Please, Please, and go, oh my God. He would he would bring out the energy, and he would ignite whoever was watching him. You were going to be excited. That was a ticket worth buying to see James Brown perform. He was excellent. But no, I never had a chance. I never had a chance to meet him. But I appreciated his work. And of course, like I said, Say It Loud. It became like a creed for a lot of black folks in a lot of organizations.
All right, thank you. I'm about to wrap it up. I just would like for you to speak about your open house. And
well, my open house actually started with the fact that me being a professor here at Columbia University allows me to bring guests to any of the facilities that I go to, like the gym, for example. So I have access to the gym, and I'm a big-time basketball player. I mean, I played. I'm not playing anymore, but I was a big. I mean, I lived and breathed basketball. I consider basketball like an African dance. And they say you can bring 2 guests if you're a faculty member. I'd bring 15 guys. Man, please. And I knew the people at the door, and I knew they weren't going to reject me because I knew the folks that were clocking folks in. So I have a crew leave my house, and we go right over to the gym and just dominate the court. Because, black folks, that's our thing. White boys stayed, sometimes they'd come, they could get in the game, but they weren't dominating, and we controlled the court. And I remember one day, my son is the one that reminded me of the beginning of my open house, because I would have the boys, we'd play basketball, then some of them would go home, and then some of them would come to my house. And, the tradition, if you come to a black person's house, you go to white people's house, they may offer you something to drink. You come to a black person's house, they offer you some food. So I had food. And I had salmon croquettes. That was my main menu. And I would have home fries and so forth. And I'd prepare food for them after we played some ball, and we sit around and we talk just about what was going on. One of the Sundays that I was playing basketball, there was a young man that came and played with us. I didn't know him. I never met him. And he says, man, I know who you are. And I said, well, that's cool. I said, I appreciate that, He says, but I got this poem I want you to hear. I said, brother, we getting ready to play some poetry right now. I ain't got no time to be hearing no poetry. I'm ready to play, because I was really caught up with the game, with playing basketball, and he wanted to interrupt with me doing hearing his poem, and I wasn't that interested in hearing the poem right now, because I'm ready to shoot some hoops. So we played. I believe he was on my team. We won 4 or 5 games in a row, which meant that we played really well, and he didn't hurt the team, even though I didn't know who he was, and I was very satisfied. So here we are getting ready to come to leave, and I said, well, let me hear that poem now. I'm ready, you know. He reached into his, and I felt so bad, because if I had listened to the poem when he wanted me to hear it, I would have heard it. But now the poem has disappeared because of the sweat has just caused the ink to run throughout the page, and you couldn't tell if there was a word there. It just looked like a big old blot of ink, because he had the poem in his pocket, and we were playing hard. So I really felt very, very bad about that. And I blamed myself, and I said, listen, brother, you wrote that poem? I said, yeah, I just wrote it today. I said, well, you know what? I'm going to take you to my house. I'm going to sit you in my chair. I got a magical pen, and I'm going to give you a very special piece of paper, and you're going to remember that poem, and you're going to rewrite it. Since you wrote it, it's still in your head. You'll get it. So I brought him over here, and while he was in here rewriting the poem, I was in the kitchen fixing some food. And I fixed some food for myself, him, and my kids, of course, over here too. And he remembered about, I think he said 85 to 90% of the poem. And it was a decent poem. I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was worthy. I could see how he could really fall in love with it, because he was probably not a real poet. He's just trying to become one, whatever. And then Pharaoh told me, he says, it was from every Sunday after that, he found out that there were other people that were playing ball with us who were also poets. And he would entertain, come and let them do their poetry, and they'd come in, and you'd always cook food. So we kind of just, it evolved into an open house where word got around that Abiodun is having poets come over to his crib. And now my mother tells me point blank, my mother says, you know, you think people come in here to share their poetry and get some feedback. They come in here to eat your food. You're not charging anybody anything. They come in here getting free meal. He says, matter of fact, wrap up a couple of croquettes for me. I mean, I was trying to take her out on a Mother's Day. We went to Copeland's, which was reliable, and they were proud of it. But to Copeland's, that was proud. I should have known. It's Mother's Day. Those folks are all reserved. Everybody's planning to take their mother's place. We go to Sylvia's, same thing. Everything's crowded. And my mother says to me, she says, don't you have an open house where don't you cook, make sandwiches for people? She said, why are we running around here trying to go to some other place? I come out here to your house eating some of the croquettes. I said, well, I thought, she says, no, I would be happy if you just take me to your house. So I brought my mother here and sat at the table, and I gave her some croquettes with some grits and some home fries, and I made some fried apples as well. And she was very happy and pleased. And that's what she said to me. She says, you think people come in here for poetry? They come in here to eat your food. And she says, I said, you get that salmon free? I said, no, I gotta pay. She says, and you don't charge people nothing. They just come here and eat, and you pay the juice. You get all that for free. I said, Mommy, I'm not getting anything for free. I'm paying for it. And so the only way I can get back at my mother is I say, Mommy, you always talk about going to church in Harlem. They got a lot of nice churches, and praying to Jesus. I said, and I'm not going to do that because I'm not down with that. I said, but as far as I know, and I've read the Bible backwards and forwards, Jesus was a servant. I'm not like Jesus, but I believe in serving. I have no problem with serving my people, and that's what I'm doing. She says, well, and let's say helping you pay your rent, and you're serving yourself into the poorhouse. I said, oh boy. So what I did, but to compensate from what my mother said and all that, is that the open house, I have this ceramic plate that I put in the middle of the floor, and I put a couple of dollars in there just to let people know that this is a donation. Because I don't know what kind of money you have. You may not have any money, but I don't want to turn you off because money is a factor. I don't like money. I hate money. I mean, but I know that money is a hammer and a nail for us to carry on with our lives. But I'm not going to worship money. And but the open house has been a super. And out of my open house, some phenomenal people. Saul Williams started out here. Jessica Moore started out here. There are a lot of folks who are now well-known poets who actually started by coming here, reading their stuff, and getting some feedback from me, which gives me a lot of, it shows the respect that many of the young poets have for me, because if I say yay or nay, they take me to heart, and And I tell people, I mean, one of my biggest expressions when it comes to dealing with poetry, I'll say, you know, like, for example, his brother had a poem, and he said he met this girl at a party, and she was this, that, and the other. He had a nice description about her, and they went over to the house and had a euphoric experience. I said, brother, the poem was fine until you said you had an euphoric experience. I said, why do you mean they have with a brick? He said, what do you mean? I said, that's a brick. That's not poetic. A euphoric experience? I said, I know what euphoria is, and I know. I said, but if you're writing a poem, you don't want to throw a brick at me. You want me to feel. I said, you got 5 senses, brother, and this is a rule. Anybody that's been to my house and that's heard me critique their work, know you have 5 senses, and of those 5 senses, you got to use one, or if not all of them, to try to express yourself. Give me a sense of touch, a sense of taste, a sense of smell, a sense of sight, sense of sound. I said, that's the only way that you're going to be able to communicate with me. Most of the time we're dealing with a sense of sight. I said, but you can smell. I mean, if I say his dignity smelled like rotten meat, we know that this is not a dignified person. I said, oh, wow. I said, but it's a teaching moment. And above everything else that I do, I will tell people in a minute, the thing that gives me more, that I have more passion than anything else in, is my teaching. The ability to share some ideas with others and for them to get it. I'm passionately involved with that. And scared to death when I go in front of a 3rd or 2nd grade class, because they look like my grandparents. They look old, they look like they're not looking at me, they're looking through me. I never know if I'm going to be good enough to appeal to them, but I so far it's been all right. But I must admit, that's my toughest audience, when you look at those little kids. But I'm able to reach them and teach. And any agency that has hired me, and every agency that does art education in the school system that I work for, they get big time benefits, because the principals will always say, can we get Abiodun to come back? Because the kids, I have teachers, I have principals saying, when you're not here, the kids are in the lunchroom or in the hallway singing the songs that you share with them, or doing the raps that you share with them. And it gives me big joy to know that I've left something on their minds that they want to take home with them. I walk down the street, many times I'm walking down 125th Street, and I run into somebody grown with a child, with his wife. They say, oh, that was my teacher in PS 154. Yo, can we do There Was a Man Named Martin? And they start doing the rap. Or can we sing Daddy Joe? Or can we do Harriet's Train? I had a brother in St. Martin, the sister I know named Nicole. She's from St. Martin, and she had started this organization called Art Saves Lives, because me and my lady ran to her, and she is from there, and she was a dancer in Fela, in the play on Broadway about Fela. And so then my lady helped her write this grant to get money to start her organization, because she says the kids in St. Martin don't have nothing to do. Y'all come here for vacation, from the water, get the sun, but they got a bunch of kids here that are just running wild. They have no outlet. They don't have no dance instruction. They don't have no this. So she wanted to do some programs that kind of give them some stuff to do. So she set up a program, and it's called Art Saves Lives. And then she said, well, I got to hire you to come and do some workshops. So, of course, I said, that's a flip, because I've been paying to go to St. Martin. Now I'm going to get paid to come to St. Martin. I said, this is fine with me. So I did, but I'm at the airport, JFK, getting ready to take a plane to St. Martin, and there's a brother that's staring at me, and I knew he was a dancer. He looked like a dancer, nice-looking brother, and he had that body build like a dancer. But I said, the last thing I need to do is be harassed by some gay dancer. Oh, my God. Because he kept staring at me. I'm saying, oh, man, this is going to be an uncomfortable trip. I mean, I'm worried that this guy is gay. He's going to be harassing me. He just kept staring at me, and I'm like saying, you know what, this has got to stop. So we get into St. Martin, and I remember in the baggage, I'm getting my bag with the baggage claim. This guy is still staring at me. He's getting his bags too. So finally I said, I got to say something to him. So I walk over towards him, and before I say anything, he says to me, did you ever teach at 161 in East New York? I said, probably so. I've been all over the city. I knew it was you. You were my teacher. He says, you do the song, There Was a Woman a Long Time Ago. So I said, yes, my songs are Harriet Tubman. Oh, man, used to come on Thursday. That was me and my boy would say, that's the holy day, because the poet man is coming. And I know that song. I knew, and all this time I'm thinking that this guy is gay, and he's just trying to remember, was I his teacher? I said, what grade was it? 2nd grade.
Wow. That's dope.
I mean, it blew me away. And it let me know that I've said stuff that has stuck. As a matter of fact, I said to him, I said, you remember that from the second grade? He said, that's the only thing he remembers from the second grade. So I know that teaching for me has been something that I've really, I will go to heaven with knowing that I've been a good teacher. And I don't even call myself a good teacher, a good facilitator. Because the idea is that I want you to know, I want you to learn from me on how to teach yourself. And that's the best way. Because if you're just doing everything based on my instruction, that means that you're my puppet. Now I want you to do that. I want you to be your own person. But I want to give you enough information to solidify your personal existence unto yourself.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Where can people contact you for?
Email is always possible, poetabiodun@yahoo.com. If you're not spelling my first name, it's Poet Abiodun. It's POETABIODUN @yahoo.com. And I have a phone. It's a landline. It's not a cell phone. I do have a cell phone that I've never activated. I just haven't made that a part of my day yet. My kids keep on bothering me about it, but I'm old school. And my phone number, which if anyone was to call me, I would always respond. If I'm not here, you can always leave a message. And that's 646-861-2646. 646-861-2646. Those are the ways to be in touch with me. And I have no problem with people calling when they really have a reason to call.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your time, sir. It's been an honor as always, man. Enough respect. I thank you for your contributions, you and your comrades' contributions, because y'all helped change the world for us. You know what I mean? I remember hearing the last poets when I was a kid, and I was like, whoa, what is that? You know what I mean? Because I was used to listening to the glossy R&B music and soul music at the time. So when I first time heard the last poets when I was a little kid, I was like, whoa. So when I first met you, the first time I met you was I was an A&R on Dead Prez album, Let's Get Free. And you came through to do your poem
Black Rose.
Black Rose on
I did some things. Those brothers, I love those brothers. We had M1 and all those cats. Yeah, I still am in touch with them too, and I appreciate them very, very much. And that was a nice moment. Matter of fact, we did a video of Black Rose, which when Last Poets had an opportunity to go to South Africa. We were met by some sisters and when we came off the plane, and this one sister says, "I'm your Black Rose," and she was beautiful. And I said, "Well, it's the first time I've been in South Africa, and if you could be my Black Rose and be my escort, that would be nice." She says, "Can my friend come too?" She had a brown skin sister with her. So for the entire time I was in South Africa, I had this beautiful chocolate sister with a caramel brown sister as my escort the whole time. It was phenomenal. But that, of course, when you do videos, the people across the pond, I mean, South Africa and Europe, man, they watch the videos that we do here in America religiously. They really are deep into that stuff. I mean, because I didn't think about how that has an effect on people in other parts of the world. But when people say things like what you just said to me about how we affected change for you and for some others, I always have to give it right back to the folks, because I had no plan to be a voice in your mind or anything else. But when people accept you and you're saying something that they appreciate, you actually give me a purpose for being here by listening and agreeing and appreciating what I'm saying, which makes me appreciate myself more and makes me also want to say something that's going to continue to elevate your way of thinking. So it's like you turn me on, I turn you on. You turn me on, I turn you on. We're just constantly helping each other grow. And that's the joy I see, because I mean, I'm grateful without question that I've been a positive light in many people's mindsets. But that's because you've let me in. Because sometimes people say things that are very correct, but the door's locked and people, they don't always break through the barriers. I listen to Umar Johnson. I think Umar says a lot of wonderful things, and he's a smart brother. He got some avenues to express what he's feeling about a bunch of stuff. But I had a sister friend of mine. She says, "Why does he repeat himself all the time? He'll say the same thing about 4 or 5 times." I said, "Well, he's really trying to hammer home that point, and so that's his style for doing that." She said, "I don't like that." But so sometimes people say things that you think you might be saying something that's going to be effective, and other folks might not see it as effective. They may see it as annoying. And I don't want to ever be annoying. I'm hoping that I always will be effective on some level. And if I am annoying, I mean, I'm not trying to be. I want to be palatable and able for you to digest what I'm saying in a way that you can appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you once again, and happy birthday, belatedly.
Yes.
To you and your comrades, and continued success, sir.
Thank you, man.
All
And
right.
I want to thank you, Malachi, for being consistent, because ever since I know your tag is water, and just like your tag, you have been just that. You are like water. You continue to flow, and I love your consistency, because that's another issue I have with some of my people. You know, we got some folks that will do it good today, and then the next day they done jumped off that horse, they do something else. We must remain consistent. If I'm going to take on this as my thing, as my mantle, then I'm going to continue to try to make it work and improve my skills in whichever way I can. But I'm not going to keep flipping and flopping, because then nobody will know where I'm at, and I won't know where I'm at. And as long as I've known you, you have been a rock. You've been real consistent. And you do it quietly. You're not, we don't have no fanfare. It's like, when Mel Tapley was alive, he was the cat that I really appreciated, because we had a wonderful relationship. And I just felt so bad that the Amsterdam News didn't even announce his departure or whatever. I mean, he was in charge of the arts and entertainment section of the Amsterdam News. And I mean, I still don't know really what happened to Mel Tapley. All of a sudden, he's just poof, just gone, like he was never here. But then I know Boyd. He's a cool guy, but Herbert Boyd. But I don't have the relationship with him that I have with you. You and I have been in concert. We've been talking to each other now for years, and I really have nothing but mad appreciation for you, because you've kept that line open for me to express myself as well.
Yeah, honor, sir, honor, man. Like I drew up the name, the byline Water, partly because of you, because I had written an article about the 5%ers, and in Feds magazine, I asked you to sign it for me,
Right.
and you put "We Are the Revolution." So what I did was I drew it up as "We Are the Educated or the Erudite or Evolving Revolution." And Bruce Lee said that our fighting style has to be formless like water. So when I started writing, I said writing is just going to be one aspect of my fighting style against the system.
Oh, that's
You know what I
fabulous.
mean? So I thank you for that too, sir.
Okay, brother.
All right. Peace.
Peace.